notice rare side
The
effects.
opportunity for this healing stream to be talking to 7 billion people across the world.
Their theories were wrong. The drugs and surgeries changed my body.
Both are symbolizing the decline of Christianity or the Christian faith within the United Kingdom.
Hello and welcome. This is Talking Politics. We'll be starting with the news of the day. Keir Starmer has been dealt a harsh blow as research conducted by Labour has shockingly revealed that almost 4,000 pensioners could die if winter fuel payments are cut. The analysis warned Conservative proposals to axe the allowance for 10 million elderly Britons in 2017 would increase excess debts by 3,850. Labour's research, which was published when Sir Keir Starmer was serving as Jeremy Corbyn's shadow Brexit secretary, also labelled Theresa May's proposal the single biggest attack on pensioners in a generation in our country. The research said since the introduction of the winter fuel payments by Labour in 1997, allowing for significant variation in winter weather, deaths among the elderly have fallen from around 34,000 to 24,000. However, backbench Labour MPs will now look to mount a rebellion against Starmer himself as the Prime Minister looks to force through his deeply unpopular plan to test the energy bill subsidy. Starmer initially hoped to avoid a Commons cabal scrutinising his proposal by introducing the cuts through secondary legislation, but was forced to hold a vote after pressure from the Tories. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he will deal with whoever the American people elect as their president ahead of his trip to the United States later this week to discuss the Ukraine and Middle East conflict with U.S. President Joe Biden. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to travel to the United Kingdom on Monday, a week after Britain suspended some arms export licenses with Israel over equipment that could be used in the war in Gaza. When asked if the U.S. administration had been angered by the suspension, Starmer said he had spoken with them beforehand and that they were clear that the UK had a different legal system. The Prime Minister also commented on the recent riots in the United Kingdom, saying they were symbolic of a broken society. In response to leading cancer surgeon and former Health Minister Lord Darcy's report on the state of the National Health Service, the NHS, Starmer said, if there's one thing this country knows is the last government broke the NHS. Our job now, through Lord Darcy, is to properly understand how that came about and bring about the reforms.
I'll be very clear. As the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I will deal with whoever the American people elect in as their president. But I think it's very important to remember, particularly for Ukraine and for the Middle East, the next few weeks and months are critically important. And therefore, it's important for me to speak to President Biden about our shared response, the response of our allies, to the pressing immediate issues, but also to the more strategic long-term issues. And that's why I'm going on both of those fronts to have that discussion, Ukraine and the Middle East. The riots, I think, were symbolic of a broken society. Now, I'm not going to justify for 1 minute the violence in those riots. They are not capable of justification. They were not protests. They were far right in the main. But underneath that, I think there was a societal black hole, a breaking of our society, which we need to mend. If there's one thing this country knows, it's the last government broke the NHS. Our job now, through Lord Darcy, is properly understand how that came about and bring about the reforms.
Actor Idris Elba joined Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Monday to launch a new anti-knife crime coalition. Elba, known for roles in the television series The Wire and Luther, has previously advocated for a ban on machetes and so-called zombie knives and headed his own anti-knife crime campaign, Don't Stop Your Future. The meeting of the coalition at 10 Downing Street was also attended by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, representatives of charities and family members of knife crime victims. While fatal shootings are rare in Britain, knife crime is surging. In the year to June 2023, around 247 people lost their lives where a knife or sharp instrument was involved, with many of those dying being teenage boys or in their early 20s. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the cabinet on Sunday it was a difficult day and strongly condemned the killing of 3 Israeli civilians at the Allenby Bridge border in the occupied West Bank by a gunman Israeli security forces said had crossed from Jordan. A loathsome terrorist murdered in cold blood 3 of our civilians, Netanyahu said. I send my condolences to the families of the murdered. The attack took place in a commercial cargo area under Israeli control where Jordanian trucks offload cargo entering the West Bank, officials said. The crossing, also known as King Hussein Bridge, is about midway between Amman and Jerusalem, just north of the Dead Sea. The Israeli military said it had eliminated the attacker, who had stepped out of a truck from Jordan in the area of the bridge to shoot at Israeli security forces, and that 3 Israeli civilians were pronounced dead as a result of the attack.
This is a difficult day. A loathsome terrorist murdered in cold blood 3 of our civilians at Allenby Bridge. On behalf of the government and myself, I send my condolences to the families of the murdered. We are surrounded by a murderous ideology led by Iran's axis of evil. In recent days, loathsome terrorists have murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood and 3 Israeli police officers. The killers do not distinguish between us, they want to murder us all, until the last one. Right and left, secular and religious, Jews and non-Jews. What prevents the elimination of our people as in the past is the strength of the State of Israel and the strength of the Israel Defense Forces.
A Wall Street hedge fund is positioned to play a central role in the future of Thames Water after scooping up the company's loans at knockdown prices. New York-based Elliott Management is among a pack of U.S. players to have taken up Thames Water debt at steep discounts in an attempt to capitalize on the financial uncertainty engulfing Britain's largest water supplier. Elliott, which manages assets worth around $65 billion, has snapped up cut price bonds running into many hundreds of millions of pounds. It now ranks amongst the largest lenders in a pool of an estimated 90 financial institutions that Thames counts as senior creditors. Elliott's position is said by City sources to be worth close to £1 billion, placing it at the heart of a rescue attempt being prepared by a select group of the largest lenders. A club of prominent creditors is poised to begin detailed work on a radical financial restructuring proposal that aims to repair Thames's stretched balance sheet by writing off a significant portion of its debt at the same time as finding new shareholders willing to pump in fresh equity. Boeing is offering its staff a 25% pay bump over a 4-year contract in a bid to avoid a strike that could potentially shut down its assembly lines as early as Friday. Union leaders representing more than 30,000 employees have urged the workers to support the proposal, describing it as the best contract they had ever negotiated. If approved, the agreement will be an important achievement for Boeing's new chief executive, Kelly Ortberg, who faces pressure to fix the company's quality and reputational issues. If ratified by union members, it will be the first full labor agreement between the firm and the unions in 16 years. The current contract between Boeing and the unions was first reached in 2008 following an 8-week strike. The two sides agreed to extend it in 2014, and it is now due to expire later this week. Although the preliminary deal did not match the union's initial target of a 40% pay rise, negotiators still praised it and advised members of it to accept it. Aside from the pay bump, the deal offers workers improved health care and retirement benefits and a commitment by Boeing to build its next commercial aeroplane in the Seattle area. The European Union needs far more coordinated industrial policy, more rapid decisions and massive investments if it wants to keep pace economically with its rivals, United States and China, Mario Draghi said on Monday in a long-awaited report. We've lost our main supplier of cheap energy, Russia, Draghi said.
Now, we have said many times that growth has been slowing down for a long time in Europe. But we've ignored it. I would say until 2 years ago, we would never have such a conversation as the one we're having today. Because things were sort of going well. We were doing well out of globalization. Unemployment was steadily falling. But now we cannot ignore it any longer. Now conditions have changed. World trade is slowing. China is actually slowing very much, but it's become much less open to us, and actually it's competing with us in global markets on all accounts. We've lost our main supplier of cheap energy, Russia, and now we have to start for our defense again for the first time since the Second World War. But the investment needs that all this entails are massive. The investment share will have to rise by around 5 percentage points of GDP to levels last seen in the 60s and the 70s. I always like to make a comparison. The additional investment provided by the Marshall Plan between 48 and 51 amounted to 2% of GDP.
The analysis segment is next. Stay tuned. Well, Prime Minister Keir Starmer seems to have shot himself in the foot. He has been dealt a harsh blow. His own research conducted by Labour shockingly revealed that almost 4,000 pensioners could die if winter fuel payments are cut. And he did this analysis while he was the Brexit Secretary in 2017 under Theresa May's government then. Interestingly now, he wants to cut winter fuel allowance payments. Joining me is Bishop Cei Dewar. Bishop, you're welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Pastor Wilma. It's lovely to be with you.
Thank you, Bishop. Taking a look at what Keir Starmer is doing and looking at his research, it's a very interesting. Some think this is very duplicitous. How come the very person who did the research presented it under Theresa May's government, then warning the Tories that if they cut winter fuel allowance, almost 4,000 people would die, 3,850, and he stated that the winter fuel allowance has actually saved lives. He's the one cutting the very same allowance.
Well, the Labour Party's position, and now they are the Labour government position on winter fuel payment, has been duplicitous, to say the least, for several years. It's when Keir Starmer was leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, he repeatedly attacked the Conservative Party and the Conservative government over proposals that they were looking at of reducing winter fuel payments, and made a concrete pledge both prior to the election and in the election manifesto for the Labour Party that if they were elected, that they would guarantee to protect the winter fuel payments for pensioners, and within a matter of days of being elected has pulled out this quote-unquote black hole that he says of £22 billion in the public purse, which the Office of Budget Reform apparently knew nothing of. How, I'm not quite sure that is the case. I don't know, given that they're the independent regulator for all government spending and would surely have noticed a rather large black hole. But this move to cut the winter fuel payments is duplicitous. More than that, simply because it comes in the same week that he hands out £9.6 billion in public spending pay rises. That's to unions that have supported the Labour Party in the election campaign and pledged their support to the Labour Party, and £11.6 billion plus to oversee international green energy projects, meaning that fuel is of great importance to the Labour government. It's just not fuel in this country for pensioners that have most likely paid their tax contributions for the entirety of their working life. So to see that a report now comes out where he, as Shadow Brexit Secretary, authors the report stating that almost 4,000 people would die as a result of losing the winter fuel payment really just goes to strengthen the argument that the opposition party, the former Conservative government now has, in stating how this whole moniker of two-tier Keir that came out of the protests that turned into rioting and the subsequent actions that followed really show that there is a two-tier government system in place. If we have such a black hole, and he authored this report, knowing full well the long-term consequences and the potential deaths as a result of it, why on earth does this country commit to spending on pay rises and international green energy projects when clearly we have a massive need to fix the problem at home? And we've committed to $3 billion a year in spending in the Ukraine war for, as Sir Keir Starmer put it, as long as it takes. We only need 1.6 billion a year to keep the winter fuel payments going. And I noticed since last week when this was, or the week before when this was announced, they're now targeting single occupancy pension homes by the potential of removing the single occupancy on council tax for pensioners as well as single people, most of which are single mothers or single fathers that would be hit tremendously hard by such a rise. So really what this shows is that the Labour government are in a complete ignorance of the people over which they're governing, and whereas they have an allegiance to the unions that supported them and whatever their political agenda is, actually meeting the needs of the people that voted for them and meeting the priority needs of pensioners that will have to be making a very significant decision this winter of, choosing to either heat or eat, as they say. It really is not a priority for this government. So this whole thing just really goes to show, for me anyway, as a commentator, how really duplicitous both the Prime Minister and the current Labour government are. All politicians tell stories, all politicians lie. We have an age-old adage in politics of you can tell when a politician is lying, their lips are moving. But to actually commit to a policy like this, that endangers lives, and he wrote, when I mean you, I mean Sir Keir Starmer, he knows he authored that report, he knows the potential thing, and I'm glad that tomorrow he is facing a significant rebellion amongst his own party, because I'll tell you this, I wouldn't want to be on the Labour benches tomorrow if the vote goes in favour of the government, because I can guarantee next election, those pensioners, if they survive, are going to remember, I voted to take money out of their pockets so that they couldn't heat their homes this winter. I really wouldn't want to be in that position. So I think we're seeing the beginnings of a potential rebellion, minor rebellion within the party, but further stirring of the unrest amongst the British public over key issues, especially when it comes to something as truly significant as deciding, for want of a better expression, who gets to live and who doesn't as a result of not being able to afford fuel this winter.
This is actually shocking and mind-boggling for a lot of people, Bishop Kai. You talked about the pensioners not voting Labour for the next election. It's not just the pensioners. What about people who have their parents as pensioners, or siblings or uncle and auntie, their relatives as pensioners? It's going to be a very painful experience if this winter allowance is cut, because are we saying that Sir Keir Starmer, after authoring that report in 2017, and I just want to read this from the report, he said in that report, since the introduction of the winter fuel payment by Labour in 1997, allowing for significant variation in winter weather, deaths among the elderly have fallen from around 34,000 to 24,000. So he knows that cutting the winter fuel allowance is going to lead to excess deaths. Are you saying that's what the Labour government wants. They are prioritizing, in quote, the war in Ukraine and the Green Deals over the lives of the pensioners here in UK.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you look at a previous statement made by Sir Keir Starmer, when he was asked Westminster or Davos, his immediate reaction was Davos, clearly showing that he's far more aligned to the World Economic Forum and the agenda that they have than the benefits and the best interest of the United Kingdom. I would argue this point. I don't think we've had a prime minister since Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom that actually put the national interest at the forefront of their politics. You know, Sir Keir Starmer said it's the public over the party, it's the people over the party. And I believe that to be true. Sadly, it just doesn't appear that it's the British public and the British people that he's choosing over the party. It's always somebody else. Over the weekend, I tweeted out, Sir Keir wants, it's okay for grants, not grants, because we'll commit to money on green energy for foreign nations, but we won't concern ourselves with taking care of the elderly. Now, this comes off the back of three coinciding moves. Firstly, the plan to stop the winter fuel payments. Secondly, the plans to increase the state pension are now delayed by up to 5 years. And thirdly, another commitment that Sir Keir Starmer made in the run-up to getting elected was a pledge that Labour had fully costed the ability to fuse fuel prices, energy prices, so there would be no increase in our energy bills. And now in the United Kingdom, they've already announced within the first few weeks that energy prices in the UK are set to rise by, on average, 10% per household a year. So even the lowest income families are set to see their winter fuel bill go up by at least £150. Now, when you're living very close to, you know, eating hand to mouth and living day to day on what little money you've got from state aid or state pensions, £150 increase means you've got to make major decisions on, can I even afford to turn the heating on when it gets cold? So I wouldn't say that it was their agenda, but it certainly plays into certain depopulation agendas where life is expendable from organizations like the World Economic Forum that we have covered so many times, and certainly the man of God, Pastor Chris, has spoken so openly about exposing this demonic agenda. I think what it is we truly have a very disingenuous government that is putting the people that they deem as eligible for their support and their thanks for, you know, a successful election victory first and foremost, and we are not putting the public interest. Now, I personally think, given the combining factors of what is likely to happen in the coming months now, if the government are successful in the vote tomorrow, and everybody that I know in Westminster tells me that the Labour whips are busy whipping the votes to make sure the government doesn't lose in its the bill tomorrow, or the motion to vote on whether or not winter fuel payments should be cut in Parliament. If they win that vote, I think we're going to see an awful lot more people than the nearly 4,000 that Sir Keir Starmer has predicted, because of course we have to take into consideration at the time the report was written, we didn't have the two other contributing factors that are going to play a key over the next few months as we head towards what looks to be one of the coldest winters we've potentially had for many, many years.
Poverty, we can see here, is man-made. It's made by policies, and it looks as if the Labour government is bent on that. Because very clearly, as you said, during this winter, the pensioners are going to be taking a decision either to eat or to hit. Keir Starmer, you rightly said it as well, when he was going into number 10 Downing Street, just at the door, at the steps of number 10, he said it that he will prioritize the people over party politics. Why spending so much money in sponsoring Ukraine, so much money in sponsoring the Green Deal, yet you're screaming of a black hole, and you're going to cut winter fuel allowance that will lead to excess debt? anyone looking at it, it's not just what you say, but the ripple effects of what you say, because this will lead to excess debts and definitely a depopulation. And that's
when the
why
Conservative Party were elected in 2010, the public purse was not in a good position. We'd had 13 years of a Labour government, 13 years of borrowing way beyond our ability to repay. Our gross national debt was the highest it had ever been. Now, we're in a similar position, largely because we have massive overspending and massive support systems in place for a completely manufactured global pandemic that we've seen. Right? That's put the British purse, the public purse, the taxpayers' money in the state that it is. But with David Cameron becoming Prime Minister, the then Conservative government began a process of austerity that was very, very painful for this country to endure. But at no point did we take away money from pensioners with winter fuel allowances, public spending where it was needed the most. But we had to make painful cuts. It was so painful. I don't know if you remember it at the time, Pastor Wilmer, the age of austerity that we went through. The austerity measures were so painful to the public purse that we actually went through a double dip back-to-back recession in the United Kingdom. And yet we came through it. We halved our national debt in less than 3 years. We got back on a sure footing. And when Europe was still in the recovery of the 2008 global global banking crisis that happened, Britain emerged in 2013 going into 2014 as the only economy growing. We've had several years of vast economic growth. Then we are hit with this pandemic, which leaves us in this position. So any reasonable government coming into power in this July would have looked at the financial purse and said, right, we have major issues here that we need to address. We have a major black hole that they claim, which nobody actually acknowledges that there is this black hole other than the Labour government and the Labour cronies in the civil service. Nobody on the other side has said anything about it and refutes it vehemently. And common sense would have said, then we need an austerity plan. We have to cut spending, which means that we cannot commit £3 billion to a proxy war in the Ukraine every year. We cannot commit £9.6 billion to paying union pay rises because we made a promise to. We cannot commit to £11.6 billion of overseas grant funding for green energy products, for green energy products. We cannot commit to continuing to spend over $8 billion a year on illegal immigration. There are massive ways to cut this deficit and fill the black hole tonight. But clearly that is the priority. What the priority is for the Labour government is to take from the most vulnerable in society, propose massive taxes on the wealthiest in society, quintessential of any socialist government, which has led to already we are seeing a mass exodus of some of the wealthiest people in the United Kingdom leaving the United Kingdom, taxing the middle class out of the marketplace, which we are about to see in the October budget. And the one thing we should learn of this, as was warned many, many times in the election campaign, is that socialists are great at spending other people's money. The only problem with that is it doesn't take long for other people's money to run out.
For what many people are saying, these policies themselves are dehumanizing. We already know the sort of policies that are in Davos, and then to prioritize party politics over the lives of the elderly is what many are shocked at. And we'll be back to that to talk about that later. But Bishop, I want us to go straight into the focus of the day's segment. So everyone, stay tuned. And back to this segment, we are looking at the United States' first presidential debate between Trump and Harris. Bishop Kirsten, am I still with me? Bishop Cei
I'm definitely
Dewar.
not Bishop Kirsten.
Bishop Cei Dewar. Very interesting. It was because we were speaking about Keir Starmer the last time. But looking at this debate coming up now in this 2024 US election, let's take a look at the forecast of what we're seeing in this debate. It's really interesting that most of the polls, every other place, is giving us something else, that Harris is leading, and people are wondering, how could Kamala Harris lead when she's been the worst vice president in history? All the proposals she's saying she's actually going to enact, why didn't she enact them in her 4 years as vice president? But I want us to look at this chart full screen. Let's look at this forecast we see here. Trump is leading 52% and Harris 47% by polling market. Every other poll, interestingly, saying a different thing. And you know that the polls are actually accumulated based on the kind of questions that are asked. Sometimes the other polls only ask questions that will elicit the kind of answers that they want. Let's look at the swing states. If we go to the swing states, Bishop Kai, we are seeing Arizona here, Trump will lead. Georgia, this is the forecast is saying Trump is leading in the polls. Pennsylvania, Trump. Nevada, Trump. Michigan, Harris. And Wisconsin, Harris. Now the debate is tonight. Interesting to see what Kamala Harris is going to be saying about her policies. And Trump already has a lot to say about his policies, which we know. He called the Green Deal, Bishop Kai. Yeah, one of the things he said about the Green Deal is that it is the biggest scam in history. $10 trillion he called the Green New Deal.
Well, just looking at that, when the squad and their backers, including then Senator Harris, had proposed the Green New Deal, it would have been the end of the US economy as they knew it. $10 trillion on green energy projects, banning the use of motor vehicles or fossil fuel powered motor vehicles, banning the use of aeroplanes, the complete elimination of cows from the United States, which forms a huge part of both the economy of various states and a vast part of the diet of most Americans, in the way that they consume fast food, and beef is quite a staple within the US. So most of the policy, in fact, you can't even argue that Vice President Harris has put forth policies, so to speak.
Four policies?
She's pinched a few of President Trump's ideas that they're now masquerading as policies. But when you put forward a policy idea, you've got to demonstrate how you're going to do it, and have an idea of how it's going to be costed to do it. And when you look at various things that the Harris Waltz ticket has put forward, I mean, just the costings of it alone, it would be shot down at its first attempt through a Republican-controlled Congress. Or certainly wouldn't make it through, Republican-controlled House of Representatives or the Senate, because of the immense spending committals. And unfortunately, Vice President Harris truly believes that she can achieve a lot through executive orders as president, that the president, as President Biden, or then Vice President Biden, during the Democratic primaries 4 years ago, pointed out, as a president, you don't have the authority to do that. You cannot simply change a nation via executive order. That's what dictators do. But with the polling, it's fascinating, because when you look at all of the mainstream polls that they use, which to me are more propaganda than polling, every single one of them is either saying it's too close to call, or has got Harris way out in the lead, pushing the Harris Waltz ticket. Yet Polymarket, who've been very, very successful in their polling in the last few elections, clearly have the former president way out in the lead. 5 points. A 5-point difference in elections is huge. We're not talking about a few votes. You're talking about several million votes to be 5 percentage points out in front. And when it comes down to the 6 swing states that are quite often the key indicators and the key players in deciding the electoral college, which is what actually gives the candidate the presidency, when you see the breakdown of the swing states, if Vice President Harris wins 2, she loses she loses 27 electoral votes in comparison to President Trump, who would emerge with, 50 plus. I think it's 52 electoral college votes as opposed to Vice President Harris's 25. Those 6 key states, those 6 swing states, I should say, could end up being a key player in the election. Or we have the potential that nobody is polling to see, quite likely, if it was a successful rounds of debates for President Trump, who absolutely has the capability to destroy Vice President Harris's ticket in the debate arena, you could potentially see somewhere close to a Reagan-esque victory of 1984, when the polling was very fair, very close for a majority of the electoral campaign. And in the final debate, it took one line from then President Reagan to absolutely destroy his political opponent, the Democratic candidate Walter Mondale. And in that debate, you can even see the moment where Mondale smiles, realizing, I've just lost the election. And come election night, he got absolutely trounced, losing 49 of the 50 states. So I don't trust polls, as you rightly said. You can make a poll say whatever you wanted to say. You just ask the right questions, and we can take the same topic and ask 3 separate questions and make the answers go either way from the same person. And it's always, polling's always done with a very small demographic of the country. And if you do it in particular areas and target the right kind of people, you're always going to get the answers that you want. The only major polling that I would ever trust to be a good indicator is polling that is on a massive scale and encompasses a huge number of potential voters rather than a key demographic. When you look at the US, 350 million people live in the United States of America. 200 and something odd million people are eligible to vote in that continent. To take a poll of a few thousand people and say this is a representation of the voting intentions of the entire American public is about as disingenuous as you can get.
Very true. I want us to look at these swing states again. When you were actually mentioning it, I wanted it to be on the screen. Let's have a full screen, and Bishop, let's go through it. You mentioned, you were talking about the electoral votes, and you can see that if we were to go according to this poll, which is just the forecast, which we know, Harris will be having only 25 electoral votes compared to Trump, who actually will be having quite a number. We can see...
Well, these 6 states, the swing states, the reason they call them swing states is they're very close in polling, every, as it looks, but they will play key results in the final toll of the Electoral College. And in the United States, the popular vote is not the one to look at. All of the popular votes, even when I think back to when Trump was squaring off against Clinton back in 2016, the popular vote had Clinton way out in the lead, 50-something% to Trump's 13. I mean, at one point they were saying it was an 85% surety that Hillary Clinton would win compared to President Trump's 15%. At the end of the day, polling day, when all of the votes are counted, the popular vote, as has proven to be the case in several occurrences, is not the deciding factor in who becomes president. The electoral colleges and these 6 key swing states here clearly demonstrate, quick maths looking at it, it's 50-something, I think it's 52 or 53
52
votes,
versus 25.
that come out for President Trump as opposed to 25. Those 27 votes difference between the two. That, and if the current polling of individual states holds true on election day, that puts President Trump in the White House as the 47th president of the United States. It does not favor Vice President Harris. And even in the last 24 hours, we're seeing Vice President Harris's polling dropping slightly, taking a dip. I think the honeymoon period post-DNC is beginning to wear off. And tonight in the US will really show whether or not she is presidential material. It took one debate for President Trump to undo President Joe Biden and cause the democratic coup to remove him. Let's not forget, I should say, in taking into consideration.
Yeah.
Vice President Harris is the Democratic nominee for the presidency in a way that has not fulfilled the DNC criteria. She has not received a single vote from any voting member of the DNC eligible to vote in the primaries. She has been coronated as they have conspired to remove the sitting president after that disastrous first debate with Donald Trump. And when it comes down to it, the more she speaks, I mean, I did a quick look just before we came to it. In the same time, from the announcement at the the RNC, right, the Republican National Congress till today, President Trump and J.D. Vance, his running mate, they have done a total of 30-something public interviews. In that same period, Vice President Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, have done one, not live, not unscripted, pre-recorded, edited, scripted interview with CNN. One. That should tell any member of the voting public the DNC clearly do not want her out speaking to people because they cannot control what she says. She can't stick to the narrative, and ultimately she has the potential to betray their agenda. So when you don't want a candidate speaking, we saw it during the pandemic. You know, 7 or 8 months, President Trump was out on the road campaigning. Where was Joe Biden? In his basement in Delaware. Why do they not want a presidential candidate to be out in front of the cameras at every opportunity, out to the public in every opportunity? Because they know the more she speaks, the more she turns voters away.
Bishop Guy, I want us to take a look at the policies very quickly, because it's interesting what you're saying, and a lot of people are looking forward to this first U.S. 2024 election presidential debate tonight between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Is interesting what we're going to see, because what we understand is that Kamala Harris has been practicing over and over again. She has a replica of the stage where this debate is going to be taking place in her hotel. And at the same time, there is someone that is standing as Trump, representing Trump, asking her questions, and she's memorizing her answers, trying to respond again. And then Trump is just there with his advisors and saying that he's going to concentrate on policies because he knows exactly what to say. So we know that Kamala Harris has a problem when it comes to public speaking. She has a problem when it comes to debate, and the kind of mantra that she's always saying. I just want us to watch this clip, and we'll be right back. And this is actually of Kamala Harris when, again and again, they try to digest what exactly she was saying when she uses the mantra, which you clearly state is very, very Marxist, is a Marxist incantation. Then again, we have Trump's policy when Trump talked about the Green New Deal. I don't think many people are aware of what the Green New Deal really does. So let's start with Donald Trump talking about the Green New Deal. I'll be back. Kamala Harris.
Because I just mentioned Kamala Harris, the presidential candidate of the Democrats Party in the United States. Sometimes you listen or you hear certain people speak, and they either sound confusing or funny. And in this case, they said it was a word salad. I want you to listen to a better analysis of what she actually has said on several occasions. Listen to this video properly.
Vice President Harris will say repeatedly, what is the quote? The quote is that we can see what can be unburdened by what has been. Is that word salad or Marxism?
It's Marxism. That is, in fact, not at all word salad. It is a Marxist, as I said on Twitter the other day and got mocked relentlessly by the media for this, I said it's a Marxist incantation, as a matter of fact. It's like a spell. So you can see the possibility of a world that's unburdened from its own history, which is exactly what Mao Zedong did when he launched the campaign of Smash the Four Olds, the four old characteristics of Chinese society. They were going to make a new China that was going to be unburdened by what had been in the past of China. This is what the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, did when they took over power in Russia, is that they were going to make the new Russia. They're going to make the new man, as a matter of fact. People could become unburdened by what has been so that they could see what could possibly be in the terms of a socialist utopia.
Thank you. So those are symbolisms. So when she uses that language, those on the same side recognize, especially those who are initiated, they recognize that's a member of that cult talking. So she uses the language. But the uninitiated doesn't get it. Doesn't get it. That's a bad sign. All right, let's go to the next one.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then
Now,
we call it the wrap-up
I was
smear.
trying to get a point across to you. I think it was on day one or so. How they train the people to lie. They train their political officials, the ground force, or their spokespersons. And then also those in the news media, trained and paid to lie. And here is Madame Pelosi giving a master class on lying, how to do it well. So the next time you're listening to these people, you need to know what you're listening to. Watch this.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic, and it's self-evident. But I think I'm worth the trouble, quite frankly. I love the fray. I'm not, I know.
Do you see that? How to smear someone and then merchandise it. And then that when others see it and say it's reported on the newspapers, reported by the press, they're going to believe it. In fact, Kamala Harris also said something very close. She said when she was a prosecutor, by a stroke of a pen, she could get anybody in trouble. And it's a charge. She charges you with an offense, and then you will now have to spend money, get lawyers. You see it? You have to do all that running around. All that will cost you time and money and, of course, frustrations. And later on, she says in 2 weeks, she can decide to withdraw the case. But by then, she's already punished you.
Very interesting, Bishop Kai, listening to this. That was just to show you the policies of Kamala Harris. This was discussed by the man of God, Pastor Chris Oyakhilome, during your Loveworld special, season 9, phase 7. That was day 3, just happened last Friday. And it's interesting, you can see that mantra we talked about, which is actually a Marxist incantation she's been saying. You know, she says this in every speech. There was a clip we saw out of 54 different statements or interviews she had or public appearances. Altogether, she said it 54 times. And then look at what they do in the Democrats, which is the smear campaign. You can understand why Tulsi Gabbard said that is a cabal that is not of God.
It is, and when you look at the we'll call them campaign slogans, you know, because Vice President Harris has been battering around this, let's look at what can be unburdened by what was for quite a while. But now, since the DNC, they want a campaign of joy and hope, and have lifted a campaign slogan from a German socialist party that turned out to be the Nazi party. You know, the ultimate goal of socialism is far beyond what we call cultural Marxism. What we saw with a truly communist government in China, and to many intents and purposes is still there, the same kind of communism we saw in North Korea, and still exists in many ways, but both slightly blended with this very unique form of state-controlled capitalism now. The one thing we have seen is that socialism never works. Everywhere they have tried it, everywhere it has been experimented as a political system, it has failed. The concern is that under every socialist government, tens of millions of people have died as a direct result of that communist government. And to me, cultural Marxism is this, what should we say, the bait on the hook of global communism that they try and wheel people in with these false promises of what can be, unburdened by what has been. You cannot simply erase the history of a nation and a people and offer a completely dystopian view of a potential future that nobody would ever achieve.
Let me kindly stop you there and let's listen to Trump himself when he was talking about the Green New Deal. I think a lot of people still do not understand how much that Green New Deal is actually costing the United States and other countries. Watch this.
To further defeat inflation, my plan will terminate the Green New Deal, which I call the Green New Scam, greatest scam in history probably. A $10 trillion scam that we waste, we throw, like throwing money right out the window. It actually sets us back as opposed to moves us forward. And rescind all unspent funds under the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, which the Democrats agreed after it was approved that it wasn't for that purpose, it was for other.
So interesting, Bishop, when you're listening to that, he called it the Green New Scam. He said the greatest scam in history, $10 trillion is this same Green New Deal that here in the United Kingdom, we're spending about $11.9 billion on, and we're giving it to fund green new products, yet we're cutting wheat to fuel allowance.
Well, within the context of the United Kingdom, the spending that you've just quoted isn't actually money spent in the United Kingdom. We're giving £11.6 billion to other countries to fund green energy projects and green energy research. We've still committed huge amounts of money in the United Kingdom to green energy. You know, the Labour government have proposed GB Energy, a green energy company that will not be able to produce the amount of energy the United Kingdom needs at a cost of £8 or £9 billion. We're spending huge amounts of money on green energy deals, the result of which, or green energy projects in the United Kingdom, the result of which is they don't produce anywhere near enough the energy needed as consumers in the United Kingdom.
What we're seeing here,
Bishop,
they destroy
huge swathes of greenbelt land and viable farmland. So really, the Green New Deal is not as green as it intends to be. When I look at the damage that what they call lithium leach fields that people really need to go look at, the damage that that does to the fields where lithium panels are used to generate solar electricity, making that soil toxic for potentially a century, if not longer, if there's any leaching into the soil. The wildlife it kills, the damage it does
will have to continue.
the ecology. Sorry, Pastor Wilmer, I could talk for the case.
I know, but we have to continue the Green New Deal later on because of lots of things associated with it. But what we have seen is that this is actually impoverishing countries. The United States of America, $10 trillion. Here in the United Kingdom, as you said, 11.6 billion pounds. Not in this country. We're giving it to other countries just to produce green new energy for this country. So when Donald Trump calls it a green new scam, and he says one of the things he'll be doing is to terminate it when he becomes president, it reminds me of the pale horse in the Bible where you're talking about Green New Deal and green new energy. But thank you for coming on the program, and we'll continue this next time.
Thank you, Pastor Will.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. That was Bishop Cei Dewar. You can send emails to me to info@loveworlduk.org about the Green New Deal, which Donald Trump has said is the Green New Scam, the biggest scam in history, costing the U.S. $10 trillion. Thank you. God bless you.
Getting into Newdal is almost like a ghost town.
Pharmaceutical company has admitted that its COVID vaccine causes rare side effects.
The opportunity for this healing stream to be talking to 7 billion people across the world.
Their theories were wrong. The drugs and surgeries changed my body.
Both are symbolizing the decline of Christianity or the Christian faith within the United Kingdom.